If you had nothing left but one choice, would you still choose kindness? The rain falls hard, cold enough to sting, soaking through worn denim and a thin gray hoodie as Ethan Cole walks down a near-empty street, hands buried deep in his pockets, breath visible in the night air, every step heavy like he is carrying something no one can see, something that used to be a life, a job, a future, now reduced to a rusted pickup truck parked 3 blocks away where he sleeps with a folded jacket as a pillow. The silence around him broken only by the distant hum of traffic. And the soft whimper he almost misses. He stops, hesitates, tells himself to keep walking because he has nothing left to give. Not tonight. Not anymore. But the sound comes again, weaker this time, and something inside him refuses to ignore it. So he turns, stepping toward the alley where a golden retriever lies trembling against a dumpster, its fur soaked, its eyes searching, not for food, not for shelter, but for someone. Ethan exhales slowly, kneeling despite the water pooling around his knees. Hey, you okay? His voice softer than he expects. The dog doesn't move, just watches him like it is waiting to see what kind of man he is. Ethan glances down at his hands, empty, useless, then back at the dog, and without thinking, he shrugs off his hoodie, the only dry thing he has left, and gently wraps it around the shivering body. The cold hits him instantly, but he ignores it, lifting the dog carefully into his arms. Guess it's you and me now, he murmurs, forcing a faint smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Somewhere miles away, inside a glass tower glowing against the skyline, a woman stands still in front of a wall of monitors, her sharp eyes locked onto a single screen as security footage zooms in on a man holding a dog like it matters more than anything else in the world. Victoria Hale doesn't blink, doesn't speak at first, just studies him. The way he moves, the way he chooses, the way he doesn't walk away. Then finally, quietly, she says, "Zoom closer," her voice controlled, unreadable, but something beneath it shifts, something unfamiliar. As the image sharpens and Ethan disappears into the rain, unaware that in choosing a stray dog over his own survival, he has just stepped into a story far bigger than himself, one that has already begun watching him back. The truck door creaks as Ethan pulls it open with his shoulder, careful not to wake the dog curled in his arms. The inside smells faintly of old coffee and worn fabric, a space barely big enough for one person, yet tonight it holds two. He settles onto the driver's seat slowly, easing the dog onto the folded blanket in the passenger side, his fingers lingering for a second as if making sure it is real, still there, still breathing. "You picked a bad night to get lost," he mutters, voice low, more to himself than the animal. Outside, the rain keeps falling in steady sheets, tapping against the windshield like a quiet reminder of everything he does not have. No heat, no home, no plan. He rubs his hands together for warmth, then reaches into a small paper bag. Pulling out half of a cold sandwich, he pauses, staring at it, calculating without saying it out loud. This is all he has until morning, maybe longer. His stomach tightens, but he tears it in half anyway, holding a piece out. "Here," he says gently. The dog hesitates, then leans forward, taking it carefully, not desperate, not wild, just grateful. Ethan watches, something shifting in his chest, something he has not felt in a long time, the kind of quiet that is not empty. Across the city, Victoria stands in the dim glow of her office, heels silent against marble floors as she circles the screen, arms crossed, observing. "Run a background check," she says without looking away. A man beside her nods, already typing. "No record of theft, no prior flags," he replies moments later, surprised. Victoria's gaze sharpens slightly. "Keep watching," she says, softer this time, as if the order is meant for herself as much as anyone else. Back in the truck, Ethan adjusts the blanket around the dog. Noticing the collar for the first time, his fingers brush against the metal tag. Engraved, clean, expensive. Far too expensive for something that belongs in an alley. He frowns slightly, turning it just enough to catch the faint reflection of the dashboard light. The initials stand out, simple but precise. VH. Ethan exhales slowly. "You are not from around here, are you?" he murmurs, a small smile forming despite everything. The dog looks at him again, calmer now, trusting in a way that feels undeserved. He leans back, closing his eyes for a second, exhaustion creeping in. But sleep does not come, not fully, because something about tonight feels different, like a line he did not see himself crossing until it was already behind him. He gave up the last dry thing he owned, half his food, his space, for a stranger that cannot even speak, and yet for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he does not feel invisible. Inside the tower, Victoria watches the moment Ethan touches the collar. Her expression unreadable, but her fingers tighten slightly against her arm. He noticed. The assistant says quietly. Victoria nods once, slow, deliberate. Good. She replies, her eyes never leaving the screen as Ethan leans his head back against the seat, unaware that every small decision he makes is being measured, weighed, and remembered, unaware that this simple act of kindness has already set something in motion that neither of them can stop. Morning comes slowly, gray light filtering through the cracked windshield as Ethan stirs, his neck stiff from sleeping upright. For a moment he forgets where he is. Then he hears the soft breathing beside him and turns. The dog is still there, curled tightly in the blanket like it has always belonged. He lets out a quiet breath he did not realize he was holding. You made it through the night, he says, voice rough but warmer now. The dog lifts its head slightly, eyes meeting his, calmer, steadier, as if something has shifted between them. Ethan glances outside. The rain has stopped, but the cold lingers, clinging to everything. He rubs his hands together before opening the door, stepping out into the damp morning air. Stay, he says instinctively, though he is not sure why. Maybe because for the first time in a long time he does not want to come back to nothing. He moves around to the back of the truck, digging through a small plastic bin until he finds a half-empty bottle of water and an old towel. He hesitates again, calculating, always calculating, then shrugs slightly and pours some water into the lid, bringing it back. The dog drinks slowly, not desperate, still controlled, still different. Ethan watches closely, noticing the way it carries itself, the way it trusts without begging. You are definitely not a street dog, he murmurs, reaching out to gently dry its fur. Careful, patient, like the action matters. Inside the tower, Victoria has not moved much, the morning light casting sharp lines across her office. She watches as Ethan steps away from the truck, her eyes narrowing slightly. Where is he going? Her assistant asks quietly, but Victoria does not answer right away, because she already knows. He will come back, she says finally, certain in a way that surprises even her. And seconds later Ethan does, carrying something small from a nearby corner store, a plain brown bag. He opens it and pulls out a cheap pack of dog food, the kind you buy when you barely have anything left. He pours it into the lid, setting it down with a faint shrug. Do not get used to this, he says with a half smile that fades too quickly. The dog eats, still calm, still measured, and Ethan leans back against the truck, watching the quiet street, his mind drifting to things he does not say out loud, like how this was not part of the plan, how there was no plan anymore, how somehow helping this animal feels like the first right decision he has made in weeks, maybe longer. His eyes drop again to the collar, the engraved initials catching the light. VH. He turns it slightly, studying it more carefully now. Something about it feels important, like a clue he does not fully understand yet. Across the city, Victoria steps closer to the screen, her reflection faint in the glass. He spent money, the assistant notes, surprised. Victoria nods once, slow, thoughtful. He invested. She corrects quietly, her voice softer than before, almost impressed, as she watches Ethan sit there in worn clothes beside a truck that barely runs, sharing what little he has with something that cannot give anything back. And for the first time in a very long time, Victoria Hale does not see a liability or a risk. She sees something far more dangerous, something she cannot control, and it makes her watch even closer. Ethan wipes his hands on his jeans, glancing down at the dog as it finishes the last of the food, the quiet street stretching out in front of them like a question he does not know how to answer. All right, what now? He murmurs, more to himself than anything. The dog looks up at him again, steady, patient, like it is waiting for him to decide. And that is the strange part. Ethan realizes he has not felt needed in a long time. Not like this. Not in a way that does not come with conditions or expectations. Just a simple presence beside him that says stay. He exhales slowly and pushes himself off the truck, stretching his stiff shoulders. "We cannot stay here all day," he says, reaching for the collar again, this time more deliberate, turning the tag fully toward the light. The initials are clear now, sharp against the metal, VH, and beneath it, barely noticeable unless you are looking for it, a small engraved line of text. Hail Group. Ethan frowned slightly, the name pulling at something in his memory, something he has seen before, maybe on a billboard, maybe on the side of a building, something big, something far from where he stands now. He lets out a quiet breath. "Yeah, you are definitely not mine," he says, the words heavier than he expected. Across the city, Victoria leans forward just a fraction, her eyes narrowing as she watches Ethan read the tag. Her assistant glances at her, waiting for a command, but none comes. Not yet, because this is the part she cannot control, the part she wants to understand. Back on the street, Ethan pulls out his phone. The screen cracked, battery low. He hesitates before typing, searching the name slowly. Hail Group appears instantly, polished, powerful, a company worth more than he can even comprehend. He stares at the screen, then back at the dog, a small, almost disbelieving laugh escaping him. "Of course you belong to someone like that," he mutters, shaking his head. The gap between his world and that name feels impossible, like trying to step from one life into another without a bridge. He pockets the phone, his jaw tightening slightly as he looks down at the dog again. "All right, Lucky," he says, using the name more naturally now. "Let us get you home." The decision settles in his chest with a quiet certainty, not because it is easy, not because it benefits him, but because it is right, and that has to count for something. Victoria watches him straighten, watches the moment. The choice locks into place, and something shifts in her expression, something subtle but real. "He is going to return her," the assistant says, almost surprised. Victoria nods slowly, her voice quieter now. "No, he is choosing to," she corrects, and that difference matters more than she expected. As Ethan opens the passenger door and the dog climbs in without hesitation, trusting him completely, unaware that every mile he drives from this point forward is being followed, mapped, and remembered, and that the destination he is heading toward is not just a corporate building or a name on a screen, but the beginning of a test neither of them fully understands yet. Ethan grips the steering wheel a little tighter as the engine coughs to life, the old truck rattling beneath him like it is unsure it wants to cooperate today. He glances at the dog sitting calmly in the passenger seat, its gaze steady, almost reassuring. "All right, Lucky, let us see where you came from," he says quietly, shifting into drive as the tires roll slowly onto the damp street. The city begins to change as he moves, block by block, the worn buildings giving way to cleaner storefronts. Then glass, steel, and silence that feels expensive. Ethan notices it without saying anything. The way the sidewalks look different here, the way people walk faster, dress sharper, like they belong to a world that does not overlap with his. He exhales slowly, eyes flicking to the GPS on his cracked phone. The Hail Group headquarters is less than a mile away now, but it feels like crossing a line he cannot uncross. "You ever notice," he murmurs, glancing at the dog, "how some places just feel like they were not built for people like me?" The dog tilts its head slightly, listening without judgment, and somehow that makes it easier to keep going. Across the city, Victoria watches the small blinking dot moving steadily toward her building, her fingers resting lightly against the desk as she studies the pace, the hesitation, the way Ethan slows at intersections like he is reconsidering every step. He is not turning back. Her assistant notes, almost impressed. Victoria does not respond immediately, because what she is watching is not just movement, it is intent, and intent cannot be faked. Back on the road, Ethan pulls into a nearby side street, parking a few hundred feet from the towering glass building that reflects the morning sky like it belongs to another world. He turns off the engine and just sits there for a moment, silence filling the truck, heavier now. "That is it," he says under his breath, eyes fixed on the entrance where people in suits walk in without a second thought. He looks down at his clothes, worn, faded, not meant for places like that, then back at the dog, who watches him with the same quiet trust, and something in that look pushes him forward. He opens the door, stepping out. The air feels different here, sharper, cleaner, like even the city knows this place matters more. He walks around to the passenger side, opening the door gently. "Come on," he says, and the dog steps out beside him without hesitation, staying close, as if it knows this part matters. Inside the building, Victoria straightens slightly, her gaze sharpening as Ethan comes into view through the exterior cameras, small against the scale of the structure, but unmistakable. He came himself, the assistant says softly. Victoria nods once, her voice calm but carrying something new beneath it. Of course he did, she replies, because this is no longer about the dog. It is about the choice, and Ethan Cole is about to step into a world that will not see him the way she does. Not yet. As he approaches the glass doors, pauses for just a second, then reaches out and pushes them open, unaware that every eye inside is about to measure him. And only one of them is already certain of what he is worth. The glass doors close softly behind Ethan as he steps into the lobby, and everything changes. The air is warmer here, controlled, polished, the faint scent of something expensive lingering in the space. He slows instinctively, boots leaving faint damp prints on a floor too clean for someone like him. The dog stays close at his side, calm, composed, drawing more attention than he does. A receptionist looks up from behind a sleek white desk, her expression shifting for just a second as she takes in the scene, the man, the clothes, the dog. "Sir, can I help you?" she asks carefully, her voice polite but measured. Ethan clears his throat slightly, suddenly aware of every detail about himself. "Yeah, I think this dog belongs to someone here," he says, keeping his tone steady, not defensive, not apologetic, just honest. The receptionist glances at the collar, her posture straightening almost immediately as recognition flickers across her face. But before she can respond, a quiet voice cuts in from behind. It does. The words are calm, precise, and Ethan turns slowly, his eyes landing on a woman walking toward him with quiet confidence. She is dressed simply, nothing flashy, but everything about her feels intentional, controlled, like she belongs in every inch of this building. Victoria stops a few feet away, her gaze moving from the dog to Ethan, studying him in person for the first time, not through a screen, not filtered, just real. "You found her," she says, her tone softer now, almost curious. Ethan nods once, his hand resting lightly on the dog's back. "Yeah, she was out in the rain last night," he replies, his voice even, no hint of expectation, no demand for recognition, just the truth. Victoria watches him for a moment longer than necessary, taking in the details she already knows but now understands differently. The tired eyes, the steady posture, the way he stands like he has nothing to prove. "Most people would have walked past," she says quietly, and Ethan gives a small shrug, almost dismissive. "Most people probably had somewhere to be," he answers, the simplicity of it catching her off guard, because there is no performance in it, no attempt to impress, just a statement. The dog steps forward slightly, brushing against Victoria's leg, and for a brief second, something in her expression softens, something unguarded. She reaches down, her hand resting gently on its head, then looks back at Ethan. "Thank you," she says, and the words carry more weight than they should. Ethan nods again, stepping back slightly as if the moment is already complete for him. "No problem. Just glad she is okay," he replies, turning as if to leave, as if returning the dog was the end of the story. But Victoria does not move, her eyes following him, something unsettled in the way he walks away without asking for anything, without even pausing. "Wait," she says suddenly, the word sharper than she intended, and Ethan stops, glancing back over his shoulder, his expression calm but cautious. Victoria steps closer now, the distance between them closing. "You spent money on her," she says, not a question, a statement. Ethan looks at her for a second, then down at the dog, then back again. "She needed it," he replies simply, and for the first time, Victoria does not have an immediate response, because nothing in his answer fits the world she understands, and as the silence stretches just a moment too long, something begins to shift between them, something neither of them expected when this started. Ethan stands there for a moment, the silence between them stretching just long enough to feel intentional. Then he gives a small nod, almost like closing a chapter. "Look, she is safe now. That is what matters," he says quietly, his voice steady. No edge, no expectation, and he turns again, taking a few steps toward the exit like this place never belonged to him in the first place, like he was only ever passing through. But Victoria watches him move, and something about it unsettles her in a way she cannot ignore. Not the way he looks, not the way he speaks, but the way he leaves, like he is not waiting for anything in return. Ethan, she says, and the name lands differently now. No longer just data on a screen, but something real. He stops again, slower this time, turning back fully, a faint crease forming between his brows. Not annoyed, just curious. How do you know my name? He asks, and there it is, the first crack. The first moment where the unseen becomes visible. Victoria holds his gaze, her expression calm but no longer distant. Because I have been watching you, she says, the truth simple, direct, and for a brief second the lobby feels quieter, heavier, like even the space reacts to the shift. Ethan does not move right away, his eyes searching hers, trying to understand what that means, not just the words, but the reason behind them. Watching me, why? He asks, his tone still controlled but guarded now. Victoria takes a step closer, closing the space between them with quiet intention. Because people do not do what you did without a reason, she replies, and there is something in her voice that is no longer just curiosity, something closer to respect, to confusion, even to something she does not fully name yet. Ethan lets out a slow breath, shaking his head slightly. There was no reason, he says, and he means it. That is what makes it real. Victoria studies him, longer this time, searching for the part where he is lying, where he is performing, but she cannot find it, and that absence says more than anything else. Everyone has a reason, she insists, softer now, less like a challenge and more like a question she needs answered. Ethan glances past her for a second, at the polished floors, the people moving through the building without noticing him, then back at her. Maybe, he says quietly, or maybe sometimes, you just do what feels right because nobody else will. The words hang there, simple, unpolished, but they land with a weight that Victoria does not expect, because they do not belong to her world, not the one built on strategy and control. She watches him again, really watches him, and for the first time the equation in her mind does not balance, does not resolve. You gave up your last resources for something that could not repay you, she says, almost to herself, and Ethan gives a faint, almost tired smile. Yeah, he replies, that is kind of the point. And something shifts again, deeper this time, something neither of them can undo. Because in that moment Victoria realizes she is no longer observing a subject, she is standing in front of a man she does not fully understand, and that realization changes everything. Victoria does not step back this time. Even as the distance between them feels charged with something unspoken, her mind moving quickly, but her voice slower now, more deliberate. Then let me understand it, she says, not as a demand, but as a request she is not used to making. Ethan studies her for a moment, his expression unreadable but not closed, just cautious, like someone who has learned that curiosity often comes with a cost. There is nothing to understand. He replies quietly, glancing toward the glass doors again as if reminding himself where he belongs, or does not. I saw something that needed help, so I helped. That is it. Victoria watches him say it, watches the absence of calculation, the lack of expectation, and it unsettles her more than anything else today, because she cannot reduce it, cannot place it into a system that makes sense. That is not how the world works, she says softly, almost reflexively, and Ethan lets out a faint breath that could almost be a laugh, though there is no humor in it. Maybe not your world, he answers, meeting her eyes again, steady, unafraid, but it is still a world. The words land harder than she expects, because they are not an argument, they are a boundary, and for the first time in a long time, Victoria feels like she is standing on the outside of something she cannot access. The dog shifts slightly between them, brushing against Ethan's leg, before looking back at Victoria, as if acknowledging both sides of a line neither of them fully see yet. Victoria glances down briefly, then back up, something quieter settling into her posture, less guarded, more present. You were not going to say anything, were you? She asks, and Ethan shakes his head without hesitation. No, he answers, simple, direct. It was not mine to keep. And that answer lingers in the air longer than anything else he has said, because it carries something deeper than kindness, something closer to principle. Victoria takes a slow breath, her gaze softening just enough to be noticeable now. Most people would have taken the reward, she says, not accusing, just stating what she knows to be true. Ethan shrugs slightly, his shoulders rising and falling like the answer does not weigh on him the way it might on someone else. Most people need it more than I do, he replies. And for a brief second Victoria almost responds, almost challenges that, because everything about him suggests the opposite. But she stops herself, because she is starting to understand that what he needs is not something money solves. The silence stretches again, but this time it is different, less tense, more aware, like both of them are standing in a moment that matters without fully knowing why. Then Victoria straightens slightly, her usual composure returning, but altered, less rigid, more intentional. Ethan, she says again, his name no longer just a detail but something she chooses to use. What are you going to do now? The question is simple, but it carries more weight than it seems, because it is not just about the next step. It is about direction, about choice, about everything that comes after this moment. Ethan glances toward the door once more, then back at her, his expression calm but distant, like he has already accepted an answer he does not need to say out loud. Same thing I was doing before, he replies, his voice even. Figure it out one day at a time. And there is no self-pity in it, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance that makes Victoria pause, because for someone with so little, he stands like he has already decided who he is, and that certainty is something she cannot buy, cannot control, and cannot ignore anymore. Victoria studies him in silence for a moment longer, as if weighing something that does not usually require hesitation. Then she moves, not away from him, but closer to the center of the space, her posture shifting from observer to decision-maker. That is not enough, she says quietly, and Ethan looks at her again, not confused, just mildly curious, like he has heard that kind of statement before from people who believe they know better. It has been so far, he replies, calm, grounded, but Victoria shakes her head slightly, not dismissing him, just disagreeing with the limitation of what he accepts. Surviving is not the same as living, she says, her voice steady, but carrying something deeper now, something personal, something that does not belong to boardrooms or contracts. Ethan does not respond right away, his eyes narrowing just a fraction, not in anger, but in thought. Because that sentence lands somewhere he does not usually let people reach, he exhales slowly, glancing toward the dog, who now sits quietly between them like a silent witness to something bigger than either of them expected. Maybe, he says after a moment. But sometimes surviving is the only step you get. Victoria watches him carefully, the way he says it, the way he does not argue, does not defend, just states it like a fact he has already accepted. And for the first time, she sees the gap, not just in wealth, but in experience, in what each of them has had to learn to live with. She takes a slow breath, then makes a decision that feels different from the others she has made today, less calculated, more instinctive. Come with me, she says, turning slightly toward the elevators. Ethan blinks once, caught off guard not by the offer itself, but by the way it is given, direct, without explanation. Why? He asks simply, and Victoria pauses, looking back at him, her expression no longer guarded, just honest in a way she rarely allows. Because I want to show you something, she replies, and there is no manipulation in it, no hidden condition, just a statement that feels real. Ethan hesitates, not out of fear, but out of habit, the kind built from knowing that stepping into someone else's world usually comes with a price. He looks down at his clothes, then at the polished floor, then back at her, measuring something he cannot quite name. The dog stands slowly, moving closer to Victoria now, as if bridging the space between them again, and Ethan notices that, the way trust shifts without effort. He exhales quietly, running a hand through his hair before nodding once. All right, he says, not fully convinced, but willing, and that is enough. Victoria turns without another word, walking toward the elevators with the kind of confidence that assumes he will follow. And after a brief second, he does, his footsteps quieter this time, more aware, as the distance between his world and hers closes one step at a time. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime, reflecting both of them back in a mirrored surface that shows the contrast clearly, worn fabric beside tailored lines. uncertainty beside control, and as they step inside together, neither of them says anything, because whatever happens next is not something either of them planned. And that is exactly what makes it matter. The elevator door slides shut with a soft click, sealing Ethan and Victoria into a quiet space that feels smaller than it should. The hum of the ascent steady beneath their feet as the city begins to fall away below them. Ethan shifts slightly, hands at his sides, unsure where to place himself in a space that feels too clean, too precise. Like even the air has rules he does not know. He glances at the mirrored walls, catching his reflection beside hers. The contrast impossible to ignore. Worn boots against polished heels, a life of survival standing next to a life of control. He looks away first, focusing instead on the subtle movement of the numbers climbing above the door. "You do this a lot?" he asks after a moment, his voice quiet but steady, not challenging, just curious. Victoria does not turn to him immediately, her eyes fixed ahead as if the answer is something she is still deciding. "Watch people," she replies, and there is a faint shift in her tone, something almost self-aware. Ethan nods slightly, leaning back just enough to ease the tension in his shoulders. "Yeah. Test them. Figure them out before they even know it," he says, not accusing, just stating what he now understands. Victoria exhales slowly, her reflection in the glass more revealing than her expression. "I do not trust what people say," she answers finally, turning her head just enough to meet his eyes in the mirror. "I trust what they do when they think no one is watching." Ethan studies that for a second, the logic behind it clear, familiar even, but something about it still feels distant. "And what if they are not trying to prove anything?" he asks, tilting his head slightly. "What if they are just being who they are?" The question lingers, and Victoria does not answer right away, because it is not one she has built her world around. The elevator continues to rise, smooth, uninterrupted, until finally it slows, the soft chimes signaling their arrival. The doors slide open to a floor that feels even quieter than the lobby. Wide glass panels stretching from floor to ceiling, sunlight pouring in, the entire city laid out beneath them like something distant and controlled. Victoria steps out first, her pace measured but not rushed, and Ethan follows, slower this time, taking in the space, the height, the view that makes everything below looks smaller, manageable. He walks a few steps forward before stopping near the glass, his eyes tracing the streets he drove just minutes ago, now reduced to lines and movement far below. "You wanted to show me this?" he asks, not dismissive, just trying to understand. Victoria walks up beside him, close enough to share the same view, but not close enough to close the distance between them. "This is where decisions are made," she says quietly, her gaze fixed outward, "where people decide what matters and what does not." Ethan watches the city for a moment longer, then glances at her, something thoughtful in his expression. "And you think being up here helps with that?" he asks, and Victoria finally looks at him fully, her eyes sharper now, more focused. "It gives perspective," she replies, and Ethan nods slowly, considering that, then looks back out at the streets again, his voice softer when he speaks next. "Funny, from down there, it feels like people up here forget what it actually looks like." The words are not harsh, not bitter, just honest, and they land with a quiet weight that neither of them can ignore as the silence returns, heavier now, but also clearer, like something important has just been placed between them without either of them asking for it. Victoria does not respond right away, her gaze drifting back to the city below as Ethan's words settle into the space between them, not as a challenge, but as something harder to dismiss, something that does not fit neatly into the structure she has built her life around. She takes a slow breath, her posture still composed, but her silence more revealing now. "Maybe," she says finally, her voice quieter than before. "Or maybe distance is the only way to see the full picture." Ethan shifts his weight slightly, his hands resting against the cool glass as he looks down at the streets again. The movement, the people, the small details that disappear from this height. Or maybe it just makes it easier to forget the parts that do not fit. He replies, his tone calm, not confrontational, but steady enough that it cannot be ignored. Victoria turns her head toward him again, studying his profile this time. The way he looks at the city like it still belongs to him even if the world does not treat him that way. And something about that unsettles her more than any argument could. You think I forgot, she says, and there is a subtle shift in her voice now, something closer to personal than she usually allows. Ethan glances at her briefly, then back at the view, considering his answer carefully. I think. You do not have to remember the same way anymore, he says, choosing his words without hesitation. And that changes things whether you want it to or not. The honesty in it is not sharp, not accusing, but it lands with a quiet weight that lingers. Victoria holds his gaze for a moment longer, then looks away again, her reflection faint in the glass, because there is something in what he says that feels uncomfortably close to truth, something she has not questioned in a long time. The dog moves between them. Again, settling near Victoria's feet before glancing up at her, and for a brief second, the tension shifts into something softer, something grounded. Victoria kneels slightly, her hand resting gently on its head, her movements slower now, more thoughtful. Do you know why she matters so much to me? She asks, her voice low, almost distant. Ethan watches her, not interrupting, just listening. Because this feels different from everything else she has said. She exhales quietly before continuing. She was the only thing that stayed the same when everything else changed, she says, her eyes still on the dog, but her words reaching somewhere deeper. Before the company, before the expectations, before all of it. Ethan absorbs that, the simplicity of it, the way something so small can hold that much meaning, and he nods slowly, understanding more than she might expect. Yeah, he says quietly. I get that, and there is no need for explanation, because some things do not require it. The silence that follows is no longer tense, no longer uncertain, but something else entirely, something that feels like the beginning of understanding rather than the end of distance. Victoria stands again, her composure returning, but not fully, something softer remaining beneath it. I built everything to control what comes next, she says, almost to herself. But I did not expect something like this. Her eyes meet his again, and for the first time there is no distance in it, just honesty. I did not expect you. Ethan lets out a small breath, not surprised, not flattered, just acknowledging the moment for what it is. I was not expecting you either, he replies. And there is something in that exchange, something simple but real, that shifts the balance between them in a way neither of them planned. Because this is no longer just about a dog, or a test, or even a difference in worlds. It is about what happens when two people who see life differently are forced to stand in the same space long enough to understand why. Victoria stands still for a moment after his words, the quiet stretching between them not as distance, but as something forming, something neither of them fully understands yet. She turns slightly, looking out over the city again, but this time her gaze is different, less distant, more present, as if she is seeing it through his perspective. For the first time, I built this place to make decisions that matter, she says slowly, her voice steady but softer than before. To create something stable, something that could not fall apart. Ethan listens without interrupting, his posture relaxed but attentive, like he knows this part matters more than anything that came before. Victoria exhales quietly, her hand brushing lightly against the glass beside her. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking who it was actually for, she continues, and that admission hangs in the air, heavier than anything else she has said, because it is not something she offers easily. Ethan glances at her, then back at the city, his expression thoughtful, not judging, just understanding in a way that does not require explanation. It is easy to lose track when everything keeps moving forward, he says, his tone calm, grounded, especially when you are the one pushing it. Victoria lets out a faint breath that almost resembles a quiet laugh, though there is no humor in it, just recognition. And what about you? She asks, turning back to him. What were you building before everything stopped? The question is simple, but it reaches somewhere deeper, somewhere personal. Ethan shifts slightly, his gaze dropping for a second before lifting again, not avoiding, just choosing his words carefully. I used to work construction, he says, his voice even. Small crews, long hours, nothing fancy, but it was honest work. He pauses briefly, then continues. I liked seeing something take shape, knowing you were part of it. Victoria watches him closely, the way he speaks about it, the quiet pride still there even after everything else is gone. What happened? She asks, not out of obligation, but genuine curiosity now. Ethan exhales slowly, his eyes drifting back to the skyline. Company downsized. Projects got cut. I was one of the ones they let go. He says, simple, direct, without bitterness. After that, it just kept stacking. Bills, time, bad luck, you name it. He shrugs slightly, like the weight of it no longer surprises him. Victoria absorbs that, the contrast between their worlds clearer than ever, but also less distant than it felt before. And you still chose to help something that could not help you back, she says quietly, almost to herself. Ethan glances at her again, a faint, tired smile touching his expression. Yeah, he replies, because. That part did not change. The simplicity of it lands harder than anything else, because it is not about circumstances, it is about who he is regardless of them. Victoria stands there for a moment, taking that in. Then something shifts in her posture, a decision forming, not calculated this time, but certain. Ethan, she says, his name steady, intentional. I cannot ignore what I saw. He looks at her, waiting, not expecting, just listening, and she continues. You see things differently then. The people around me. You act differently, and that matters more than you think. She pauses for a fraction of a second, then adds, I want to offer you something. Ethan's expression changes slightly, not hopeful, not defensive, just alert, like he has learned to be careful when opportunities are presented. What kind of something? He asks, his voice calm but measured. Victoria meets his gaze directly now, no distance left. A chance, she says simply, and in that moment, the space between them shifts again, because this is no longer about what happened. It is about what comes next. The word lingers between them longer than anything else that has been said. A chance, simple, open, undefined, and Ethan does not answer right away, not because he does not understand, but because he does, and that makes it heavier than it sounds. He shifts his weight slightly, glancing past her toward the city again, then back, his expression calm but guarded in a way that comes from experience, not doubt. A chance at what? He asks, his voice steady, not dismissing, just needing clarity. Victoria holds his gaze, no hesitation this time. At building something again, she replies, her tone firm but not forceful. Not just for me, not just for this company, but something that actually reflects the kind of decisions you made last night. Ethan studies her for a moment, searching for the angle, the expectation, the part where this turns into something else, but there is none that he can see, just intention, and that unsettles him more than if there had been conditions attached. You do not even know me, he says quietly, and Victoria gives a small, almost knowing nod. I know enough, she answers. I know what you do when you think no one is watching, and that matters more than anything you could tell me. The silence returns, but this time it is not uncertain. It is a crossroads. Ethan exhales slowly, running a hand through his hair as he looks down at the floor, then at the dog, who watches him the same way it did in the rain, patient, trusting, like the decision is already his to make. And what happens if I say no? He asks after a moment, lifting his eyes back to hers. Victoria does not flinch, does not push. Then nothing changes, she says simply. You walk out that door, and your life continues the way it has been, and I respect that. The honesty in it lands clean, without pressure, without manipulation, and that is what makes it real. Ethan nods slowly, absorbing that, because she is not offering escape, she is offering choice, and that is something he has not been given in a long time. He takes a step closer to the glass, looking out at the city again, the streets, the movement, the life that keeps going no matter what decisions are made above it. And for a second, he sees both versions of what comes next, the one he knows, and the one he does not. I am not looking for handouts, he says finally, his voice firm, grounded in something deeper than pride. Victoria steps closer as well, not closing the space completely, but enough to stand beside him again. Neither am I, she replies, just as steady. I am looking for someone who understands what matters when there is nothing to gain. Ethan lets that settle, the words aligning with something he cannot ignore, not because they promise something easy, but because they point to something real. He glances at her once more, then down at the dog, who shifts slightly, as if sensing the moment without needing to understand it, and then back at the city, his jaw tightening just a fraction before he nods once, slow but certain. All right, he says, The word simple, but carrying everything that comes with it. Victoria does not smile, not fully, but something in her expression changes, something lighter, less controlled, as if for the first time today, something went exactly the way it was supposed to, not because she planned it, but because she did not. And as they stand there, side by side, looking out at a city that suddenly feels different for both of them, neither of them says anything else, because they both understand that this is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. And that is exactly why it matters.